Hey everyone, for today's build guide I'm going to be covering Sir Dagonet. He is an Old Faith Tyrant Arcanist that you recruit through the Old Faith Tyrant alignment, so you are going to need 13 points in both Old Faith and Tyrant to unlock his recruitment mission. Dagonet has a very large focus on debuffs and sort of battlefield control through his abilities. He isn't very offensively oriented. His damage potential isn't going to be quite as high, at least at face value, as a number of the other Arcanists. However, with the right gear and some proper skill placement in the actual battlefield, you can find him actually doing some decent amount of damage. It just won't be in the sort of immediately apparent way as a lot of other skills. And it is because of this that I suggest if you are bringing him, if you want him to be your only Arcanist, he can work that way, but I think he does work very well with at least one other spellcaster to sort of synergize off him and get more of that ranged damage output alongside him. So that's enough of an introduction. Let's just start getting into the build. Beginning with essences, I'm sure you can see that I do not have any on him. That is because in this playthrough, Morgana was my primary Arcanist, so I put a lot of my essences towards her. But when it comes to first choice of essences on him, it'd pretty much be the same thing I put on her. So going over these, you can see I have Essence of Spellcraft for +2 Spellcraft, Essence of Warding for 25% less damage from spell skills, Essence of Speed for +1 AP, and then Essence of Observation for +1 range. These two are pretty obvious. The Arcanists in general cycle through a lot of spells in a single turn, so having an extra AP just helps enable that much more efficiently. And then Observation, they're a ranged unit, so having more range is obviously going to be stronger. You don't have to move them as much. Spellcraft is essentially just to help make sure you can hit all those spellcraft checks as you're going through the game without having to prioritize taking the spellcraft skills immediately. And Essence of Warding, he has a tendency to burn through a lot of his AP, more so than some other Arcanists, because of how pretty much all of his skills are low AP costs. So there's a lot of times where you end your turn with 1 AP or 2 without even realizing it. So he is a little more vulnerable, I think, to not moving out of those AoE spells, so this could be useful on him. Now, going into gear, I'm pretty sure there's definitely some better gear options than what I ended up with. I think I ended up with some decent stuff, but if you really want to boost his damage, the main thing you want to look for is gear that boosts damage against slowed targets. We'll sort of explain more why when we get into skills, but he has essentially what is an AoE slow that also does damage, and this can basically ramp its own damage up. As it slows them, you get damage against slow targets, so I'm sure you can see the synergy there. Starting with the actual armor, we have Hand of Fate Seal. This isn't anything super special. I kind of like it for the first ability here, teleport 2 tiles away from an attacking unit when taking a melee hit. This is just to help keep him more defensively safe. You don't have to worry as much about having to position him away from people since he can kind of do it automatically. The +5% damage received until end of the encounter for each hit received. I mean, this is kind of useful if he does take a hit, but he's not going to get hit very often. All these other things are just kind of ancillary. It's whatever. I wasn't able to really get anything I could find that really synergized well, so you're probably going to want to find something different from this. For his staff, this one I do like, though. It has +28% hex intensity, which is great. You can see we have 119% hex intensity on Dagonet, so his hexes are going to be extremely powerful. +10 damage against bleeding units, so he can set bleed with his blood hex, so there's going to be some strong combo potential here as he puts blood hex on units to make them bleed and then do extra damage against them. All attacks now apply 15% vulnerability. He does have an ability to do that, but it does have a cooldown, so this just helps you spread it more quickly. And then +4 bleeding damage. This is kind of whatever, bleed damage is okay. For his jewelry, this is what I was kind of talking about at first, about wanting that slowed damage boost. This is +6 damage against slowed units. If you can find more of this, I think that is even better. +10% damage for 1 turn for each hit received. Again, just sort of, if he does take some hits, he can scale up a little bit. There's backstab attacks here. This will very rarely come up for him. And then 27% mental debuff resist. That's pretty good. For the last piece of gear, we have the Ashes of Abhar Tak. This is a great piece, -2 AP cost for Blood Hex, plus 36% Hex Intensity, plus 12 bleeding damage, and plus 2 bleeding duration. The last two are alright. It does kind of add up with some of the other stuff to actually being somewhat noticeable, but the main thing is the Hex Intensity and the AP cost reduction on Blood Hex. So now our Blood Hex is going to be super cheap, letting us spell spam that much easier. Now, going into the skills, I'm going to focus on sort of what are the important parts. To summarize some things, though, we took all of the, hex intensities and the spellcraft upgrades, master hex, the standard stuff, everything that increases hex intensity. That's a given. Also took extra damage for 10% more damage. His damage is a little bit on the lower side. Like I said, it does need to kind of build up, so this helps with that. And you can see with all of our gear, our Blood Hex has a cost of 1 now with a cooldown of 2. So this is very, very strong. It's actually more efficient than our slowing hex now. We took Quick Curse, so this makes it so the first ability, the first hex spell cost each turn has its cost reduced by 1, and this applies to Death Hex, this applies to Stigma, which is already at 1, our Blood Hex is already at 1, and our Slowing Hex is already at 1, so that's primarily going to be for Death Hex or Desecrated Ground. This is the main focus of the build, and just pretty much any Dagonet build in general. It's a 4x4 AoE that does 20% weapon damage, and it puts this effect on the ground for 2 turns, and any unit that starts in it or tries to move through it takes an additional 20% weapon damage. So that's very low. However, with this upgrade, it slows them, and we have extra damage against slowed units, so they will take extra damage as they move through it. We have the upgrade here, so it's now 25%, the AP cost reduction, so now it is 3, but if it's the first thing we do on a turn, it costs 2, and it also applies weakness. The other pieces of gear coming in here, where we do extra damage against a bleeding unit, so now we have plus 10 against bleed, plus 6 against slowed, so if they're in this and we have Blood Hex on them, that's an extra plus 16 to base, so that's a huge damage boost. Obviously, we then have Eagle Eye and Disengaged with the long reach ability here, so we have extra damage if they are farther away. So this 25% can get a lot of stacking boost onto it, and you'll see it does a surprising amount of damage as enemies try to wade their way through it, as they will take multiple hits. So each individual hit may not be huge, but it can really add up, and you'll see that as we get into the gameplay. We're going to be using Cast Stigma a lot. The only other character in the game that has this is Mordred. We do have the upgrade for 30%, so this is really good for putting on targets that we really want to help burn down. But as this does have the cooldown, we're not going to be able to get it on everyone. That's where the vulnerability from this Sign of Chul staff really comes in handy to just make sure everyone at least is taking some extra damage. I'm sure you noticed we have a lot of very cheap abilities. Our most expensive ability is 3 AP on either Death Hex or Desecrated Ground, and this can get lowered to 2 for being the first spell we cast in the round. We pretty much aren't really ever casting Force Bolt. We're pretty much just spell spamming, so that's why there's no upgrades on this. And obviously, Mindstorm, this is key to every Arcanist build. I took Strong Willed, that's why we have the 79% mental debuff resist, so he's pretty resilient to ranged mental debuffs. 0 physical debuff resist, so if you're worried about that, you may want to get the Essence of Constitution on him for that plus 50%. And yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. I didn't take Terror Wings because he's not moving a whole lot. This could be useful, admittedly, but that's more of a judgment call. And yeah, let's just go ahead and get into the gameplay and you can see what I'm talking about. So the first fight I'm doing is the first fight in the Fomorian Menace mission, level 24 endgame. You can see we're going against some Pict, and they're all coming from one direction, so this is honestly a great opportunity to show the strength of Desecrated Ground, because we have a natural bottleneck here. So if we just put Desecrated Ground here, and you can see we have 75% on this instead of that 25 because of all of our bonuses and such. So we just put this like here. You can see our initial damage is 20 and 36. That's not great, but we can get that a lot higher. The vulnerability debuff is on them to start, but we'll bump that up to 30%. Let's put Blood Hex on you as well. We're just going to put Death Hex on you, because you can see we have 77% on this because of our insanely high Hex intensity. Put that there, drops him to 76, and he'll probably die when he just takes a single step. And you're outside of the Desecrated Ground, so we're going to put a Slow Hex on you. And now you can see, due to our Mindstorm, Desecrated Ground is going to be off cooldown next turn. It's down to 63%. as it is not the first ability of the encounter. We do have a passive for that, but 63% is still very good. And yeah, I think we're in a pretty good position. We'll just do some debuffs from our other party members to control their enemy backline a little bit, like so, and we'll just see what happens. So you can see it took 60 from the initial hit and then 54 from the bleed. We have some pretty good bleed damage. He took another 51 from running through the desecrated ground. Oh, he was on the very edge, so he was able to step out of it. That's alright. Because we're just going to do this again. At all of them. Can't get out of it now. Let's put a vulnerability on you. We're going to re-death hex you. Blood hex. And we're going to put down another desecrated ground right on top of them. Just like that. We'll just kill you. And now we'll put a stigma from Mordred on one of these guys that only has, on this one here, he only has the 15% version. Get that up to 30. And now let's watch the damage. 46, 56, 55 from the bleed, 55 from taking a step, 50, 43. So that was, on each individual target, like 150 damage, plus, because of multiple ticks of 50. Like I said, that one initial hit may not be anything super amazing, but you place it right, because they're having to move through double desecrated ground there, they're just getting absolutely hammered. And now, this isn't off cooldown at the start of our next turn, but we have super cheap moves here. Oh, accidentally shot him there. That was like 78. But we can just put a blood hex on him and the bleed will kill you. Let's just go ahead and... Yeah, 46 from there. Reinforcements came in, that's alright. We'll go ahead and... I guess there's more enemies, we can just show the desecrated ground on, I suppose. Just do the usual. Put down another desecration, stigma. You just see how many spells we're cycling through. It's absolutely nuts. So let's watch the damage on this guy. He's at 259. He took 62 and then 60 from the desecration and then the bleed. Takes another... That's two numbers on top of each other, so I couldn't tell what was underneath the 38, but, you know, he's dead. Just the same thing over here. Let's go ahead and put it... We don't need the death hex, so... Just something like this. And you know what? We will death hex him. And then 47, 53, 52, 46, 46 for moving. The damage adds up really, really quickly. For the second fight, going against some Fomorians, you can see they have a lot of wargs in here. They have Grok Mog and Elite Huntmaster, I believe. They're spellcaster type. We have the Shield Breaker, we have a Slaughterer, that's no problem. We have another natural bottleneck. This is the closest entry point, so many of them are going to be running through here. So guess where we're going to be putting our desecrated ground? And just lay on the debuffs. And now desecrated ground will be ready next turn. We'll just do that to de-incentivize them trying to run around. Alright. 17, 49. Took a couple other 17 hits, and then his attack caused the bleed to kill him. So, one Fomorian down. Just gonna put another desecrated ground in here. Well, actually, if we move him up one... Nah, it's just obstructing. Alright, yeah. Just do this again. Just put a bleed on you. We're just kind of throwing random stuff around here at this point. Yep, get another one. Hitting him for 44 base now. And... Sure you, why not? Alright, now let's watch the fun. Yep. Dead, 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 dead. Move you up, cast this. Can just barely nick him. Can we? Yep, we can get both like that. We're actually gonna death hex you. Do you have the? I'm gonna put vulnerability. You see just huge amounts of damage he's taking. Wasn't quite enough to kill him, even with the death hex on, but that's fine. We should be able to reach him with the rest of our units and kill him. We have huge amounts of AP building up on our Black Knight from just passing so many turns, so should be able to finish him just barely. I mean, you saw just how insane the damage stacks up with Dagonet, especially if you can filter them all through your desecrated ground. The numbers just get crazy. So that wraps up this Dagonet build. You can see he doesn't really do a whole lot about those large single hits that most other units in the game are kind of built towards. He's very much sort of bleeding them out slowly, but that's not even entirely accurate. It's not really slowly, just bleeding them out. He puts tons of dots on them. He has tons of actual pretty good bleed damage because of all the perks we have on it, plus all the damage they're taking from the desecrated ground. They're going to easily be taking 150, 200 damage if they have enough health for that, even, as they wade their way through with good placements on the desecrated ground. And with the slow, they just can't even get through it in a single turn. So if they have enough health to not get murdered by it in the one turn, you can guarantee they're going to get killed by it on their second turn as they're still trying to make their way through it. It's an extremely strong move. It definitely needs a bit of help and some gear support to help boost it up to synergize off it a bit more. But it is very, very strong if you can get the gear to help synergize it and really boost it up. It's a lot of fun to just place these things down all over the battlefield or stack them up in one spot and just watch enemies kill themselves on it as they try to just rush through it. It's definitely a bit of a different playstyle. It's a lot of fun, and I think he's definitely capable of working in your party. Like I said, he doesn't have some of the other debuffs like Chill or Shock, which I think are pretty important. So you can see the team comp I was using him in, I had Morgoth. I definitely recommend if you are going to use him to bring someone that can provide those types of debuffs, and you should be pretty solid for the rest of your team comp. I hope this was useful or entertaining, and thanks for watching.